Alright, I think we are live. I'm a little early, but that'll give people a chance to come in. Um, so, I am getting ready to get this shared to my personal Facebook page. Um, this is my first live video for CWW writing, or Clinton W. Waters. Um, I do live videos for my mom for It's All Gravy with Teresa, but I'm always on the other side of the camera, so this is a kind of a strange new situation I find myself in. Alright, we'll give people the chance to come in. Alright, looks like we're getting a couple people. Hey, Mama. I was just telling, I don't know if you heard about being on the other side of the camera is weird for me now. I'm used to doing the live videos for It's All Gravy with Teresa. I hope everyone has a nice warm beverage. It's super cold if you're in Bowling Green at the moment. Thank you, I washed it. So my hair looks great. It's a little crazy. And true to fashion, I have multiple beverages because that's who I am as a person. So I will be well hydrated. Hey Audrey, how's it going? Thank you so much, Josh. Share for stonks for me, Clink. Hey Queen, my sweet Hannah Boone. So excited y'all are here. I really was afraid no one would show up, so thank you for being here. Hey James, how are you? So it looks like we're right about 12 now, so as I'm sure you know, today we are looking at my newest book, 30. This is the author copy that I got, so it's got this kind of ugly gray line on it. But hey, Kathy Morgan, how are you? But the cover itself was designed by my friend Chad, beautiful human being. We went back and forth on this several times, so it was a labor of love, but he wanted to get it just right, so I really appreciate that. If Thank you, Mama said it is so good, and I agree. I wish he doesn't have social media. He's taking a break from all that right now, but I will make sure he gets all the nice compliments from today. Um, if you're not familiar, if you haven't had the chance to look at it yet, you can go to bit.ly/CWW30, CWW30. And I'll just read the little back of the book blurb to you. It's Greg's birthday, his 30th birthday, the birthday that will determine the rest of his life. At midnight, there is a chance Greg will simply cease to exist. With that in mind, he has hired Joe, an Ephemera, to accompany him on what might be his last day on Earth. What starts as a rented relationship soon becomes more complicated. Is it possible to fall in love in less than 24 hours? Is there a point if one of them might not be alive at midnight? Greg can only be certain of one thing: the clock is ticking. So, from early reviews from people that got to read it ahead of time and now that it's out, got a lot of really positive reviews so far. It is a shorter story. I think it's right about 30,000 words or so. It's considered a novella, which for non-writer people, it's just not quite a novel, like a really long short story, basically. So I had originally thought of this as a novel, and then as I was writing, I kind of got to roughly where I am now, or the finished product as it is now. And, consulting with friends and stuff, I was like, well, I just really don't know if I can hit that. For a novel is considered 40,000 to 50,000 words. I was like, I really don't know if I can do that, and got a lot of really sound advice that was like, well, then don't do that. Don't force more words into it than are necessary. So the very first review of the book that I like copy and pasted into the notes on my phone so I can look at it at any time. A wonderful person on Goodreads said that I believe they said not a word more was needed and not a word was wasted. So that really made me feel good. As far as I did the right thing, I didn't push it too far. I didn't squeeze more out of it than blood from a turnip, as the older family would say. But yeah, we if you happen to get, I've got the paperback here. Oh, Kayla, thank you. I love you and Matt too. If you get the paperback, it actually comes with the first story from Futures Gleaming Darkly, my other sci-fi book. So if you are interested in that paperback, you'll get a little extra as well. So the book itself, the story is divided into 3 parts because it all takes place during one day of Greg's life, his 30th birthday. So it's morning, day, and night. So this first part I'm going to read you is the morning part. It is the shortest of the 3, but that'll kind of give you an idea of the sort of world that he's living in, Greg himself, his sort of situation. So without further ado, we're going to start with morning. If you happen to already have a copy, you can read along with me. That was always my favorite part in school. So, morning. The door creaked open, and so did Greg's eyelids. It was blue dawn, and socked feet padded their way past his back to the foot of the bed. Greg's phone illuminated his cocoon of comforter, alerting him that his ephemera, Joe, had arrived. Joe was putting his jacket on the back of the chair at Greg's desk. Right on time, Greg groaned. They had agreed on the terms of their engagement a few days prior, and Joe was holding true to them. It had felt odd to Greg, giving a stranger the code to get into his apartment. But then again, this was all a little strange. You don't get 5 stars by being late, Joe whispered. Greg could hear the smile in his voice, and it made his stomach sweetly sour. How long had it been since someone new was in his bedroom? Leftover dreams clung to the corners of his mind as he rubbed his eyes. When he opened them again, he saw that Joe's stomach was sky blue in the pale light of the morning, his shirt lifting up and over his head. He folded it and draped it over his jacket. His belt buckle clinked as he undid the clasp, jingling as he took off his pants and folded them neatly. He laid them over the back of the chair as well. Checking the time, Greg did some foggy-brained math and determined he had only gotten a few hours of sleep. Unable to feel tired for the anxiety of it all, he had performed the cardinal sin of trying to do research online, as if that would put his mind at ease. He had done so well up until that point, only the occasional deep dive every few years. He read articles and seriously considered buying some ebooks on the matter. Bombarded by ads for life insurance with sad songs about heaven, he gave up. He wound up at the same conclusion everyone had told him for years. It would never make sense, there would be no correlation, no demographic data that skewed one way or the other, no probability model of lifestyle or location that could give him an honest answer. It all amounted to 50-50. A coin that had been spinning mid-air for 30 years. He chuckled to himself at that thought. He was showing his age. Coins. What a novel concept. Greg sank a little towards the middle of the bed as Joe sat on the side. May I join you? He asked. He turned to look at Greg over his shoulder, which was mottled with pale freckles, tiny hairs glowing as the blue gave way to red and orange. Greg was surprised at how broad Joe was, taller and larger than he had imagined from his pictures on the Ephemera app. He had little love handles that rested above the waistband of his boxers, dark pink stretch marks rising up from below. Greg lifted the comforter and Joe slid in so that they were face to face. The comforter descended again and plunged them into darkness. Just Greg's morning breath mingling with the coffee clinging to Joe's teeth. Happy birthday, Joe said quietly. What's so happy about it? Greg asked, his voice gravelly. He had paid for an entire day, the moment he woke up until just past midnight that night. He had paid extra to ensure midnight was included in their allotted time. From there, whether Greg disappeared or went on living didn't matter. They'd never see each other again. Maybe it never mattered, he thought to himself. "It's yours, for one," Joe said. He placed a leg over Greg's and pulled up the hem of Greg's shirt, resting his hand on Greg's side. Greg jerked at the cold of it, and they both laughed. He felt a bit of the awkwardness ebb away. But this stranger, this Joe, was in a spot that had belonged to someone else. "What about for two?" Greg asked. "For two, you have me," Joe said into the darkness. Greg's phone illuminated again, a happy birthday text from Avni. Of course she'd be texting him this early. He felt a little silly, but the thought did occur to him that he was excited for her to meet Joe. Maybe that equated to showing Joe off, which didn't make him feel great, but then again, wasn't that a perk of having him in the first place? Bathed in the dull white glow, Greg begrudgingly admitted to himself how handsome Joe was, how that had been a major factor in choosing which ephemera he'd spend his 30th birthday with. But more than how attractive he was, Greg felt he looked like a boyfriend, the kind who had family out west and had bad taste in music but called it artistic, someone to crawl into bed in the wee hours of the morning and stick his cold mitts on your stomach. The kind of guy Greg would take to dinner at his mom's house, an event he would absolutely dread, but Joe would genuinely look forward to. For a moment, the cell phone's light reflected in Joe's dark eyes, and he thought of looking across the table at him and giving him a pained look as his mother veered into politics. He was taking a memory of Zeke and imposing Joe on top of it. It was working perhaps too well. The light grew dim and shut off, waking Greg up from his daydream. He thought of the reality, saying goodbye to his mother the day before, just in case, asking her to not come to the party, the pain in her eyes, how her lips grew thin with the effort of biting her tongue, him bringing up the only other party they had both been at, Alyssa's, 4 years ago. He took a deep breath and sighed at this. "And for 3, I have the whole day planned out," Joe said. "Nothing for you to worry about." This was part of their ruse, however, a line he had given Joe to feed him. Greg had actually planned the entire day, more or less, but Joe was going to handle everything, carry the bags, help him decorate for the party. Greg began to think about the party then, his heart beating a little quicker. God, there was so much left to do. "Hey," Joe said almost sternly, "don't spend today worrying, okay?" he said, his hand roving under Greg's shirt. He drew Greg close to him, his lips finding Greg's in the dark. He kissed him softly, their lips just barely brushing. Greg returned the gesture with force, bringing a hand up to rest on the back of Joe's head. Greg felt as though he should pull away. This was all a lie he paid for, but he was ashamed at how quickly his body was ready to accept it, felt starved and wretched. His face grew hot, embarrassed at how pitiful he was, paying for someone else's company. Joe squeezed him and said, "Okay," in a deep grumble. "Okay," Greg said, relenting and burying his face in Joe's neck. He had the sudden urge to cry. Why not, he figured. He may not have that many opportunities left. "It will be a good day," Joe said. His arm softened from grip to comforting embrace. "I promise," he whispered. What a way to ruin the mood, Greg thought to himself as he blubbered. But maybe he was a little grateful, a little glad sex wasn't the first thing they did together. The sun had officially climbed over the horizon by the time Greg's tears ran dry. Joe kissed him on the forehead and slid out of the bed. Greg finally emerged from the comforter, eyes red and puffy. "I'm going to get started on breakfast," Joe said, reaching for his clothes. "Don't," Greg said. Joe smiled and bowed his head slightly. He stood and left. A few moments later, Greg heard the clattering of dishes. Greg pulled himself out of bed and stood at the window for a moment. The world outside was well awake by now. Fat flakes of snow were falling lazily from the sky, and Greg felt a surge of happiness. He had really been hoping to see snow on his birthday. He found his e-cig and took a deep puff, blowing a strawberry-scented haze over the glass. The cars on the street hummed along like a school of fish, sliding in and out of intersections seamlessly. He spied on people's windshields sometimes, catching whatever lowered opacity show or report was playing out while they put on their makeup, texted their friends. He yawned and stretched. How grateful he was to not be getting ready for work. Running to catch the subway, sweating through his business casual attire, all the rush just to hurtle headlong towards another 8-hour day of recording sales figure for whatever it was they were hawking that month. His good luck party had been a joke, as they usually are. He had always been a little weirded out by them in the first place, having endured a few in his time with the company. He understood they couldn't have a traditional going-away party in case the person in question might show back up on Monday, but they also couldn't just ask them to pack their things and fire them for having a birthday. They did effectively do that to everyone, including him, of course. The head of HR herself met him at his cubicle as he came in for the day, a fairly small box at her side. "The big 3-0, she said nervously, and handed him the box. He was slow on the uptake, so she added, so very helpfully, "For all your things," gesturing at his desk. Greg looked from her to his desk, where his work display lay blank, wiped clean. It appeared they had scrubbed all the surfaces as well, going around his things. No trace of him would remain, they were sure of that. Greg packed away the few personalizing touches he had kept in his cubicle. A picture frame that rotated through some old pictures. Him and Zeke, him with his mother and Alyssa, him and Avni, clearly drunk. The card Peter had got him for his birthday the year before joined the frame in the box. Lastly, a Maneki Neko statue Zeke had brought him back from Japan, but Greg couldn't really stand to have it at home. It waved at him cheerfully. The box suddenly seemed huge with only 3 things in it. He could have just brought a grocery tote, really. The HR manager tapped her toes and checked her watch. She tissed at an email or text that came across its screen. "Finished?" she asked, and he really thought she was being earnest. Greg looked down at the empty desk and the mostly empty box and stammered that he was. She said, "Very good." Once his little corner of the world was packed away, she escorted him to that floor's break room. More or less a closet with a water dispenser and a coffee maker. A fridge people like to steal his lunches out of. His department members were crammed in, standing around the tiny table, which had a cake at its center. It was apparent it was a template cake from the grocery, meant for a baby shower or birthday. "Good luck, Craig," was scrawled out in red icing. No one addressed this. A piece was already missing from the edge. No one addressed this either. They raised their respective mugs or water bottles in a kind of salute to him. Most of them would be happy to see him gone, he thought. He felt he was good at his job, but the last year had been rough. Most people didn't have a lot of patience for him, or anyone, to begin with. But he threw a wrench in some pivotal deals by missing work. He assumed they were all thinking of this as they sat staring at him, slowly bringing their mugs to their lips. Greg began to feel like he had showed up to a wolf den, leering eyes and lips curling to reveal sickle fangs, waiting for him to wobble. One misstep and they'd go for the throat. Mercifully, Peter poked his head in the doorway, a little breathless, a sight for sore eyes. "Did I miss anything?" Peter asked him. "Nope," Greg said, trying to plead to him with his eyes to just end this hellscape. Good, Peter said. He explained he got caught up in a client meeting and time had got away from him. He was like a dandelion pushing out a crack in the sidewalk. Suddenly, people loosened up a little bit. Arguably, that was as loose as they could get. Some smiles. Peter made sure to point out the time Greg worked so late he bumped into the custodial robot. Greg remembered that. It had scared the shit out of him, purring as it rolled out of a shadow in the corner. It tripped an alarm in the robot, which sent the footage to Peter and the other managers for the floor. With Greg's permission, he shared it with the others. Greg knew this was also a subtle dig at the others, proving to them how dedicated Greg had been. Peter had pushed for Greg to get promotions. It wasn't his fault they never happened. In general, Peter was passionate about under-30s getting treated like people, but it wasn't a common sentiment in their field. From what he gathered from his friends, it wasn't a popular opinion in any field. They were young, the management believed. Being hungry would make them work harder. To Greg's mind, the entire building could burn down and the only thing worth saving would be Peter. People eventually started to trickle away. Productivity couldn't be reduced too much, Greg knew. People had birthdays every year. They didn't call for an extra long break. For once, Greg was grateful for the corporate clock watching. At one point, Peter leaned in and asked quietly, "Who the hell is Craig?" Greg gave him a defeated sigh, and they shared a subdued laugh together. After about an hour of stale coffee and even more stale small talk, enough people had returned to work that Greg felt he could leave. The HR manager returned the lid to cover what was left of the cake and put it into Greg's box. He tried to refuse, but she insisted, walking out of the break room and looking back at him expectantly. He had to be escorted to the door. Peter walked alongside Greg, the HR manager, on his other side. Peter told him some details about a client they worked on together, for when he came back. He said he really appreciated all the hard work, but Greg should enjoy the time off. Greg knew Peter was speaking from the heart, but was also trying hard not to acknowledge the blade that loomed over Greg's head. No hysterical crying or anything, but he got a solid hug. Some well wishes that held more sincerity than those given by the entirety of the office added together. Peter said he'd be at the party, so he would save the sentimental stuff for then. When Peter left, the HR manager shook his hand and held the door open, gesturing for him to walk ahead. "We hope to see you Monday," she said, and immediately stepped back in so the door swung shut. He wasn't certain, but he thought he heard the deadbolt latch. She stood watching him from inside the door until he had driven off. He hadn't bothered unpacking the box from the office, except for the tatters of cake, of course, which he had promptly put in the refrigerator and forgotten about. He stared at the box now, jammed into the corner of his room. It practically oozed out a gray aura of "let's circle back to that," paired with a miasma of "I'm just confused as to why." His phone dinged and he grabbed it off the bed, expecting another text. It was an email this time from the city. Its subject line read, "Happy birthday, some things to remember." The header featured the police's mascot, a happy-looking cartoon dog named Spot, mouth wide, tongue out. Spot was fond of saying things like, "If you spot some trouble, call the authorities." Greg watched the cartoon as a kid, where Spot would track down bad guys, and after a dust cloud fight scene, they'd be handcuffed and on their way to jail. The Spot from the email had a little speech bubble that read, "Happy birthday." Below that, there was an image of Spot, more serious now, his happy-go-lucky tongue no longer lolling out of his mouth. He said, "But remember to be responsible." That was followed by a brief bulleted list of things Greg should avoid doing for the remainder of the day, but especially towards midnight. Operating non-AI machinery, including bicycles. Performing any crime with the thinking you won't be around to face the consequences. Do anything abnormally or uncharacteristically dangerous. Failure to adhere to these guidelines could result in a fine that must be paid by your closest living relative. He thought of his mother again, clutching her phone to her chest when she received the email. She would likely find it sentimental somehow. Greg's last gift to her. A message from beyond, wherever he might end up. At the end of the email, Spot was surrounded by floating hearts that had been animated to drift up and away. "Remember," he said, "you are loved." Finally, the email ended with a hotline number to call if you were feeling uncharacteristically dangerous. He understood the appeal of certain things at this point. If he were ever to rob a bank, today would be the day. But no, he thought, he'd rather wait and take his chances with whatever fate grew closer with every minute. Greg took a sobering breath and smelled the coffee Joe had put on. He meandered into the kitchen, somewhat bashful. "Sorry about that," Greg said as Joe dropped a piece of French toast into the skillet and the sizzle filled the air. Joe turned, wearing only Greg's apron over his underwear. Greg couldn't help but feel bolstered by this. "Don't be," Joe said, smiling. Greg wondered if the smile was as genuine as it seemed, or if he was just being good at his job. He thought about this as he retrieved his many medications from their little cabinet cave above the oven. Purple to quell anxiety, red to stabilize his mood, pink to keep the dark thoughts away. He tossed the confetti of solid chemicals into the back of his mouth and swallowed them down. Any of them could easily have the opposite effect than what was intended, but the prospect of not taking them was just as bad. Held hostage by his own brain was the way he often thought of it, and held hostage by the city-assigned therapists he saw once a month, monitoring his progress, they said. "I saw a cake in your fridge," Joe said. "Who is Craig?" Greg laughed and tried to explain the work party, but the longer he talked, you realized Joe wasn't turning to look at him or really engaging in the conversation. Greg said maybe it was just one of those you-had-to-be-there moments. Joe didn't say anything, busy with his own work. Greg felt he was intentionally not watching, a flinching away from something ugly. He told himself he was being paranoid, but he felt a ghost standing just behind Joe, its head shaking slightly in shame. It was reality, reminding him that anything Greg did was an occupational hazard for Joe, something he dealt with to get his paycheck. He decided he couldn't leave it alone. "Do your clients often cry?" Greg asked, leaning on the counter. He noticed Joe had tucked a small suitcase beneath the bar. He probably wouldn't have noticed it if he wasn't keeping his eyes trained on the ground. Joe was committed to sliding into the stream of Greg's life uninterrupted, it seemed, another fish joining the school. "I don't think you want to talk about my other clients," Joe said. Flipping the toast. Sorry. That's just Alex's comment. Clintsbooks.com. This is the best book ever. Give me your money. Thanks. Exactly, thank you. Just saw, Lindsay, the link is bit.ly/CWW30 if you want to check it out. And hey, Kim. Hey, Rhina. Sorry. I don't think you want to talk about my other clients, Joe said, flipping the toast. His voice had the strained quality of a sober friend helping a drunk one. You don't really want to text your ex. If you think about it, you won't feel good after eating $20 worth of fast food. What if I do? Greg asked, straightening up. You don't, Joe said quietly, turning to look him in the eye. They stared at one another for a moment, Joe's face impassive. The bubbling and popping French toast batter provided the only sound to disrupt the silence. A streak of heat ran up Greg's neck. TV played Drummond House, Joe said. They released the finale last night. Figured we could watch it over breakfast. That's fortunate timing, Greg said, trying to recover his resolve. And nice of you to remember. That's what I'm here for, Joe's smile returned. Greg knew this knowledge had come from a questionnaire he filled out when he signed up for Ephemera and listed the job. Joe had a small retinue of seemingly useless facts to help sell him as a committed lover or an erstwhile friend. He supposed he should feel flattered or relieved somehow that Joe had taken the time to actually read the thing, had committed at least some of it to memory. Go relax, I'll bring it to you, Joe said, and Greg realized he had been staring at Joe the whole time. The intro to Drummond House poured softly out of the television in the living room. Greg sunk into the couch, pulling his leg up to sit cross-legged. I'll admit I've never watched any of it, Joe said, bringing him a plate of French toast laden with syrup and powdered sugar. He placed a cup of coffee, pale brown with cream and sugar, on the coffee table. He took the apron off and brought his own plate, sitting directly beside Greg, knees wide, resting against him. Greg noted how the bottom of Joe's boxers slightly creased against his thigh. It's just trashy reality stuff, Greg said, peeling his eyes off of Joe's leg. He took a bite of the French toast and commented on how delicious it was. I'm not too shabby in the kitchen, Joe said, picking up an entire piece of toast and stuffing the sugary mess into his mouth. Tell me about the show, he said, passive food. I want to know. It's one of those where they compete for a bunch of money, but the challenge is just to live like people used to. No electricity, no running water. He took a sip of his coffee. They basically live in a castle and bitch about not having toilet paper, he said. Joe laughed at this, watching the TV intently. Greg felt a little flutter in his stomach. He could make Joe laugh. It felt like a gold star. He felt equally childish. Nevertheless, Greg watched Joe watching the show, and a smile crept up on him. They ate together in a cozy pastiche, lovers reclining at breakfast, or something to that effect. In that moment he wished, as he often found himself wishing at certain parts of his life, that he could get a freeze frame of this moment, this calm, quiet moment he couldn't resist shattering like the stillness of a lake surface. The show went to commercial, and Greg cleared his throat. So Joe, Greg began, and Joe grunted in assent, tucking away another piece of toast. What if I seriously wanted to talk to you about your job? Isn't that how I get to know you? What job do you want me to have? I have a few I've practiced making small talk about. Being an accountant is an old fallback, or maybe you want me to be your personal trainer. Joe ran ahead, a hand up Greg's thigh. No, I mean your job as an ephemera, Greg said. Joe withdrew his hand and went back to eating. I want to know you, not come up with someone for you to be. Joe took his time chewing and washed it down with some coffee. He set his plate on the coffee table and said, TV, pause. The TV beeped in compliance, and the contestants stopped their bickering. Joe turned so that his whole body was facing Greg. This isn't about getting to know me. This is about you and your day, he said, and placed a hand on Greg's knee, gripping it slightly. I'm here to make you happy, and that's what I intend to do. This isn't always a happy job, and talking about it won't make you happy. He gave Greg a weak smile, practically begging him to drop it. Is it that it will make me unhappy, or it will make you unhappy? Greg asked, seeing his plate on the table as well. Setting his plate on the table as well. I feel that as your client, I should know about your past experience. He was a paying customer here. If he wanted to talk about it, they would. A piece of him knew that's what the review system on the Ephemera app was for. Obviously, it meant something to him, as he vividly recalled a review that called Joe the perfect companion. We both know what this is, Joe said. Acknowledging it will only serve to ruin the illusion. He stood and collected their plates. It's not love, but it doesn't have to feel transactional. He began to turn away, but stopped. Also, he said, talking down into the plates, just because you have paid for my time doesn't mean you own me. I never said that, Greg said, his face going flush. If you want to know about my other clients, you're not the first to act this way. Joe leveled an even gaze on him, no malice or ill intent, but stern all the same. Whatever you've been through or might go through dealing with your birthday, it's a lot. But it's coming either way. What if getting to know you will help distract me? Enhance my experience, Greg asked, standing. Joe made it to the kitchen and raked the plates clear. He sighed deeply, gripping the sink and leaning over it. How about this? You can ask me questions and I will choose whether or not I want to respond. Deal? Deal, Greg said, coming up beside him. But no more for now, Joe said, standing to his full height, practically looming over Greg. Greg nodded. I have a surprise for you. Joe went to the suitcase and opened up one of the exterior pockets. I wanted it to be your good luck charm from me, but I think it might be better served right now. He made Greg close his eyes and hold out his hands. A slick rectangular box with sharp edges fell into his palm. He cautiously opened his eyes to see a pack of cigarettes. Did you really? Greg asked, greedily ripping off the cellophane. Where did you find them? He opened the top of the pack and inhaled deeply. The menthol was old but pungent, slightly burning the inside of his nose. I have my connections, Joe said slightly. He reached into the pack and pulled one out, flipping it around and sticking it back in. There, a lucky one for you. People used to do that, right? Greg pulled another out and began looking around for something to light it. He hadn't had need for a lighter in years. Are you going to smoke it in here? Joe asked incredulously. He dug a box of matches out of the suitcase as well and lit it, cupping the flame and lighting Greg's cigarette. Why not? Greg said, holding the cigarette in the corner of his mouth. He did his best to look at Joe with a Dietrich or Bogart half-lid. Too cool to care. I might not get the security deposit back anyway. He took a small draw, his body instantly awash in the nicotine. It was incredibly stale, but it had probably been packaged a decade ago. He was still grateful and decided to keep his mouth shut and just enjoy it. This was a gesture he hadn't scripted, a present he couldn't have seen coming. It's a problem for tomorrow me, he said, trying his best to strike a pose with a cigarette. If there's a tomorrow me, he thought. That's the spirit, Joe said, smiling. Greg offered it to him and he took a puff. It was obvious he'd never smoked a real cigarette, but he assumed not many people had at this point. He handed it back, coughing and laughing. A loud, jarring chirp sounded from the ceiling, and a cordial, if not dry, voice piped into the room. Attention, resident apartment 452. Smoke has been detected. Authorities will be alerted. False alarm, Greg called out, trying hard not to laugh, waving his hand through the smoke to disperse it. Burnt breakfast, he said. The ceiling chimed more agreeably this time. Please report any damage immediately for maintenance and billing review. Thank you. Greg ashed the cigarette in the sink and smiled at Joe. What's next on the agenda? He asked. He hazarded a glass at the oven clock. They were behind schedule. He knew next would be going to get food for the party. Figured we'd go to the museum, Joe said, going back into the bedroom. Greg drew the very last bit of smoke from the cigarette and ran some water over it. The cherry let out one final guttural hiss before going out completely. The museum? Greg asked, unsure. He followed Joe and found him pulling his shirt over his head. The museum, Joe said matter-of-factly, as he slid his pants back on. They've just opened. He picked a few random things from the closet for Greg to put on. He grabbed a red scarf, Zeke's scarf, from the closet and tossed it to him. It's chilly out there. And that's that first part. So that's the end of morning. That's, as I was saying earlier, that's the shortest part. So there's still like a pretty good chunk of story left. There's 2 more parts after that. But hopefully that gave you a good idea of those 2 main characters especially, and the sort of strange near future sci-fi absurd world that they live in. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm looking back through comments now that I'm not paying attention to the book. Oh, thank you, Cassandra. Fran. Say, Kim, Ghost is actually asleep on his back with his paws like this at the moment, which is super cute, but I will mess up my setup if I try to get him in here. Thank you, Kayla. I know there's a little bit of a lag between the video as me recording it and you all commenting, but I do want to take some questions if anyone has any about the book or writing in general or any of that stuff. In the meantime, I'll do my last little spiel of if you are interested in the book after reading that, you can go to bit.ly/CWW30. Um, and I think the ebook is only like $2.99. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it is free. The paperback is $9.99, I believe. And from what I've heard, everyone's getting them really quickly, so maybe they're kind of over the holiday debacle. Josh said he finally started this morning. Yeah, exactly. Finished that first section for you. Now you can just dive right into part 2. Mom said, "I know you are my son, but it really is so good." Thank you so much. Audrey, thank you. All right, so I got some questions now. Kim, what was your motivation for this story? So a lot of different things, but this last year, as I'm sure everyone knows, was really insane for everyone. Even if everything stayed the same for you in your like everyday life, it was still different, and I had a lot of reservations, a lot of anxiety about turning 30 for, I guess, different reasons, really. But the sort of at the very beginning, I dedicate it to my friend Alex because he talked about this dream that he had where it was like a party, and he knew like he was going to turn 30, and whenever he turned 30, he would die. He would disappear. His mom was there, and but then that got me thinking like, okay, well, if you die when you turn 30, then why is your mom there? She's older than you, obviously. So it all just sort of like blossomed out of that, and like I remember whenever we talked about it, I was like, I could use that for a story. And so I did, and it just really, and me myself hitting 30 this past year, I had a lot of those like those sort of anxieties or fears over, the job that I had right before I turned 30 is not the job I have now. I was very scared of that at the time. Just me as a person, I have a lot of anxiety around change. I don't like change. So I'm learning to accept that. But the book itself is a lot of dealing with those things and dealing with all the stuff leading up to 30. I don't want to give anything away. But the main character, he had mentioned for his job, he had to take a bunch of time off work in the last year before the book started. And for various reasons, people handle everything differently, so yeah, I think sorry, I feel like if I say any more, I'll give it away, and I don't want to do that. Let's see. Mom asks, what is the term used for Joe, and what does it mean? So Joe is an ephemera. So the word ephemera or ephemeral as an adjective means temporary or fleeting. For example, an ice sculpture is considered ephemeral art because it will melt eventually. So there's a lot of this is going to get a little hippy-dippy, but a lot of people talk about ephemeral art as like especially beautiful because it won't be around for very much longer. And so in our lives, I feel like that my super wise age of 30, I'm learning more about how people, things, places, jobs, they come and go, and that sort of the ephemeral nature of that can be appreciated instead of feared. But as far as Joe, that job itself is meant to be brief. It is meant to like have an expiration date on it. So that word just felt very appropriate for that. And it also felt like in this little bit that I read, and later on in the story it talks about the the app that he uses. It's kind of like Uber or DoorDash or anything like that, where you hire someone to do something for you. And I felt like ephemera would be, one of those like hip buzzwords that lent itself to an app name. Let's see. Kayla says, how do you develop the world the story is set in? I love all the tiny details that contribute to illustrate how this work has changed from ours. Yeah, I mentioned the story about Alex's dream, and it really just ate at me. I talked about, or I have talked about before, the sort of rock tumbler that is my mind, where once something is put in there, it all just kind of jumbles and rumbles around until more stuff pops out. So, for this especially was just sort of like accepting the dream logic of on that midnight of your 30th birthday, you have the chance to disappear. So taking that as fact and not overthinking that, but then sort of extrapolating past that. So what does that look like for jobs in particular? If you've got a workforce that may or may not disappear, how do you handle that? In general, people, how do you, again, I don't want to give anything away, but they talk about it more in the story about how people handle it differently. That some people have huge extravagant parties when they turn 30, and other people don't make a big deal out of it at all. So I just wanted to not completely box in the world and have everything figured out, but I was very fascinated by thinking about what does this mean. So if what happens before 30, what happens after 30, stuff like that. And it really it all kind of fell together, so world building is certainly a challenge, and for me, I wanted to be specific enough that I was building a world, but not so specific that I was restricting it, if that makes any sense. Kim, I actually do have a fantasy. I have a collection of fantasy short stories called Dreams Fading Brightly, and my first novel was a fantasy book called Una Calcarita. So I think it's been interesting getting the feedback from this one, and personally how I felt writing it and reading it is I think I land more solidly in sci-fi. So I think going forward, obviously I want to challenge myself. I want to write a bunch of different things, but sci-fi is probably my niche, I think, that I want to stay in. Yes, Mama, I'm your hippie son. Very cool. Let's say I'll give just another couple minutes maybe for any other extra questions that come through. But I'm trying to think of anything else. I think this one, just to kind of speak from the heart for a minute, I genuinely believe this is my best work that I've written, and I really believe in it. I put a lot of myself into it, as we kind of discussed before. And so I really hope you, when you get the chance, you check it out and you consider buying it and supporting me as an artist. Also, I have this crazy idea that this is the one that will take off, right? And I know the only way that happens is if I get a lot of help. If each individual person is willing to take that risk and check it out. Let's see. Mama asked, can you add a link on here to purchase? I believe I can. 1 second, maybe. I thought I did in the description, but it may not have come through. Sorry, I'm typing. I feel like the the meme with the grandma with her glasses. Um, there you go. See if that worked. Oh, Christopher and Ella June. I love and miss them too. I can't wait to see them again. Thank you all so much for posting that link as well. Kayla asks if I preferred the novella length. Honestly, I really do. I think Una Calcarita, like all my works, I feel like I learned something from, and that one I learned that novel length, the way I write and the way I want to write, I think doesn't lend itself to full blown novels. And maybe I'll prove myself wrong eventually. But just like for the novella especially, I told the story I wanted to tell, and I remember talking to people about it, and them saying, well, if you don't have to, if you don't have to add any more, then don't. And so and I feel like in the art that I watch, or art that I consume, shows that I watch, movies that I watch, I don't mind longer form things, but I definitely I sort of appreciate like getting to the point. I don't have a lot of patience sometimes for like hemming and hawing and, oh my gosh, should we or should we not, and I don't know, and so like this, I feel like I got enough characterization and enough, like, I genuinely feel like these people, they're really only those two like main characters that you stay with for the whole book, but I feel like they're very fleshed out, and I'm really proud of that, so I want to keep doing that in novella lengths. James said, I've read all your work and 30 is my favorite so far, but I loved Una Calcarita too. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Una Calcarita came out last year towards the beginning of the year, and I think that was just like a bad time to release a book. Obviously, everything fell apart after that. So I haven't gotten a lot of reviews or responses to that one, so I really appreciate you saying that you liked it. Clembook.com/bookenstock. I'm afraid that some of those websites actually go somewhere. My super pretty moth coffee mug that I got from Idlewild Butterfly Farm in Louisville. Shout out. Not sponsored, could be sponsored, as we say on It's All Gravy. Kayla, everyone here, if you've read it, be sure to leave a review. Thank you so much. Yes, I made a post about this. I feel, I don't know, kind of ratty asking people to leave reviews directly. It's very easy to feel like I'm being desperate or whatever. But at the same time, I am kind of desperate in a good way. I really, I want, my goal is to have 20 reviews in the first 2 months. We are not quite a month in, and I have 6 reviews right now on Amazon. So we're getting there. And it really, I'm not going to, do it dishonestly. I'm not going to pay for reviews or create accounts just to make reviews for myself. I don't believe in that. But it does require sort of, and I know a lot of people have the best intentions and they just can't get around to it. Everyone is very busy and I have a lot going on. But yeah, if you do get the chance to get the book and read it, it doesn't even have to be long. Even if you just leave a rating and a 1-word sentence of "I really enjoyed this book," that is way more help than you probably realize. So if I feel this year maybe we can get back to doing live events and stuff like that. So maybe I have the opportunity to Pride a couple of years ago. Bowling Green Pride was the best in-person event I've ever had as an author. And that's been, over a year ago now. So it does, feels like a lot longer than that. So I have less of an opportunity, I guess what I'm trying to say. I have less of an opportunity to get it in front of people and to sort of have that word of mouth personal interaction where I'm like, here is my book and I really appreciate if you do XYZ, that kind of thing. So if you all can help me do that, I'm so eternally grateful. Spread the word. Once you read it, even if you didn't think it was the best book in the world, that's fine. If you just want to tell friends, enemies, families, coworkers, anyone that will listen, I'd rely on that. Is how I can branch out of just as amazing as my friend group and family are, to get it out there to the world. I want to get it out to complete strangers that have never heard of me before. And yes, Mama, when I'm there tomorrow, I will help you set up a Goodreads. But you can also leave the review on Amazon. And I know Amazon's kind of evil, and everyone has justifiably had enough of them. But on the flip side of that, they are the reason that I'm published. So they provided an opportunity that other people wouldn't, especially for like a queer writer that would have a really hard time finding a publisher. So if you can, if you feel okay with that, if you can buy and review from Amazon, that's always really appreciated. Kim, yes. If Pride happens again this year, we will definitely go. Hey, Holly, yes. It is on Amazon in ebook or paperback, either one. And I always try to remind people, too, that you don't have to have a Kindle to read Kindle ebooks. You just have to have the Kindle app, which is free. So, on your smartphone or tablet of any kind, you can read the ebooks on there. And that's a little more cost efficient. That's only $2.99 for this book. Thank you, Mama. Great short story to read for all to enjoy and to appreciate. So thank you. I appreciate that. Trying to think. If you are interested, I do, I've got my Facebook page here, and I've got Instagram at CWW Writing. I still do my side business of like design and creative and professional writing if anyone needs any of that kind of stuff. This is I do a podcast with my friends Josh and Alex, and we always have our sponsor section at the end, and I feel like that's where I'm at now. Trying to think of my sponsors. Shout out to all my family and friends that have helped me develop this and helped me get the word out. And that technically the novella is just a really long short story, basically. But that's just mincing words. So yeah, thank you all very much. Kathy, thank you. She said she read 30 and also Una Calcarita and loved both. So thank you. I really appreciate it. 30. I did want to, before I forget, there's a sort of, on the Goodreads review that I mentioned earlier, called out the title as having, there's not necessarily an Easter egg, but there's kind of a deeper layer to it, not just like 30 for his birthday. So I encourage you to read about that and figure it out. It's super cool. Something I found out, and I was like, well, got to use that. Yes, Holly, absolutely. If you get the paperback, I'm more than happy to sign it. I can also, if anyone is interested, I can get copies, like I can order copies that don't have the gross gray line on it. So I can always order them and sign them and then mail them to you or anything like that. If you did want an autographed copy, it would just be a little bit more for me shipping them to you, if that makes any sense. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me at any time if you're interested in that. I'd like to get an order going. So just let me know. Yeah. One last time, for anyone that just happened to join, bit.ly/CWW30. That's going to take you directly to the Amazon page that will let you purchase. If you haven't already, check out my other books if you're interested in those. I really appreciate y'all hanging out with me today. I am very, very excited to get this out there. And so really hope, if you haven't already, you give it a chance and let me know what you think. Thank you all. I love you very much. Talk to you soon.